We're now streaming. Mr. Mendoza, thank you.
My
You want to lead
pleasure.
us? You want to lead us in with some music?
You got it. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook at, let me check. All right, at CRE Collaborative Incorporated. And here's your open.
All right, we're back for another real estate roundtable with some of the smartest people I've ever met, and co-hosts, roundtable aficionados, Saul Klein, Realtor Emeritus, all things data advocacy, Chris Abel from the construction side of the industry, and architecture and design. Recent promotion, can't wait to hear about it on the other board we were discussing. And Becca Carlson, all things marketing out of Chicago. Quite an eclectic group of people with a lot of different areas of expertise. As is always the case, it's a three-part show. Let's talk about what happened this month, what we're doing, what's exciting us, and talk about the challenges we're facing, and then the one thing that each side of our industry could do better or should do based on this conversation and what we're seeing on the ground here. Saul, if you would, kick it off, introduce to the new listeners joining us for the first time, talk a little bit about how the data advocate is growing, but I'll leave that to you.
Thanks. Well, it's great to be here. It's always great, fun to talk real estate, isn't it?
All day.
Be able to get together and talk about it. And so, this has been kind of the month. It's only September 2nd. So it hasn't been a lot accomplished in this last day or so. Last month, real estate wise, probably inventories are up a little bit and a little bit more time on market. And we see in Congress, they're still playing around with the amount of money that they're going to start pushing down through their channels at some point in time. So I think from the residential side, it's pretty much the way it's been, only just the tempo's lowered a little bit. And there's still the same problems that we've always had, right? With the affordability and availability and not in my backyard, and who owns the data and what are you going to do with it? What's the difference between personal data and personal information, and what can you use and what can't you use? Same arguments, same conversations.
Right. And just to unpack that further, what have you heard on the iBuyer side? And for those listening, what is an iBuyer? For those that don't know.
It's just kind of interesting what, if you ask different people what iBuyer means, what does the I in iBuyer mean? And you get different answers, right? And so I think what it means to me is the institutional buyer. It doesn't mean the immediate buyer, although it could be. It doesn't mean the internet buyer, although it could be. It's really the institutional buyer. It's the people that are the institutions that are buying up homes that might otherwise be available to entry-level people and freezing people out of the first-time marketplace. And the fact that you got all these complicating factors that Chris and Becca can talk to about why there's no supplies and what's happening in the supply chain. But the fact is that we haven't been good at replacing housing for years, and we haven't gotten any better at it. And circumstances have accentuated that. And so we're going to see and starting to see different ideas and approaches. But right now, that's kind of where we are.
Well, and I'm going to come back to that in just a minute after we go around. So iBuyer to you, institutional buyer, and I'm going to land a big plane here on this conversation. Chris, talk to me about the last 30 days, 30 plus 2. Let's talk about the last 2 in this month as well. How are things?
Yeah, things are going really well. But basically, as far as the industry goes, construction's obviously has their eyes peeled on the infrastructure bill and the spending that, when the money starts coming down, who's going to be getting the jobs, how it's going to work out. We were talking just before about some of the some of the wild weather that's been coming around, and it's basically put this big glaring spotlight on some of the infrastructure talks and trying to speed up that whole process. But it's been interesting. And one of the things that I've been dealing with in the construction industry and chatting with different construction companies and contractors is that idea of like, okay, so this is going to happen, but who's going to do the work? So the hot topic over the past, it's been this way for a while, but I would say what I've heard mostly over the past month really has to do with the amount of the labor shortage and who's actually going to be doing the work, and how are things going to actually be handled and how they're going to be going to get built. And I've heard a lot about that, I will say, over the past probably 2 months, but the past month it's really ramped up the closer we get to figuring out where this infrastructure money is going to land. So always something going on.
And it's no longer a lumber shortage, but now we're talking labor. So always a shortage of some sort.
Yeah, I haven't heard too much in regards to the lumber side of things. But now they're kind of like, all right, well, now who's we have some lumber, we have some materials, but who's actually going to be, putting the hammer and nails and stuff like that. So there's always something going on, and so something interesting to track down. And it's deciphering between who doesn't have their stuff together and who's complaining versus who's got actual real problems out there and are trying to get the job done, but just don't have the ability at this or the resources right now.
Okay, fair enough. And Darren Hayes has joined us as well. Welcome, Darren. We've put a pin in iBuyer, which will become much more relevant soon. Talking shortages with Chris on the construction side, labor, and Becca was just about to introduce what's happened in the last 30 days plus 2 for marketing on her side of the fence. Becca, to you.
So one of the things that we've seen over the past 30 days in influx actually of website projects, because suddenly people are looking at their websites and realizing that they need to be more than online brochures. Suddenly they're like, oh, people actually need to interact with them. Oh, this needs to actually drive business. And so they're trying to derive different value from what they used to have on their website. And I will tell you, they don't really know how to do it. And so we've had a lot of consultations and some really, really good conversations where we've been using like heat mapping on existing site pages so that they can see how that activity is funneling through. There's all sorts of pieces to that. But I would say that is the most glaring business change and kind of mindset change. But the other thing, it was funny before Chris even spoke, I wrote down jobs, because that is the hottest topic in every industry. So I have met with bankers who need people at the banks. I have met with brokers who need more people in their brokerages. My husband's in warehousing. They need more people in the warehouse. There is every sector imaginable is really being hit by wherever we are at right now as a country with jobs. And one of the other pieces that I wrote down just rhetorically, and the reality is I don't know the answer to this, but like, where are the graduates going? Like, people graduated last year during this pandemic. People have graduated, and where are they? Where is the influx of people moving into the job market, even if some people are electing to stay out of it? So that would be something that I'd love for us to talk a little bit more about. I'm sure Saul has some amazing insight that I have not even thought of. So I see him smiling over there. So I'm looking forward to hearing in a little bit what he has to say about that.
All right. So we've got iBuyers, labor shortages, employment, what's happening, and Professor Darren Hayes, on the cybersecurity and the academic world. How are things going for you and cyber code detectives? Excuse me.
Things are going very well. Just still cyber attacks continue to proliferate. Ransomware is just such a hot topic and continues to be, and doesn't always make the headlines, but it's still costing all kinds of businesses billions and billions. We're still seeing, the same type of, wire fraud that happens with, executives calling somebody in a company, having them wire funds and so on. So there's that type of cybercrime continuing. One of the big areas of interest for me is privacy, and I don't know whether people saw today the Irish Data Protection Agency, find WhatsApp over 200 million, and they've been investigated for potential violations of GDPR, and so we kind of wonder more and more about the mobile apps that we're using and the personal information about us that is being shared with third parties. It continues to be an issue, and what apps can be trusted, is definitely an area of interest for me.
Absolutely. And welcome back from the big conference in Vegas. Hopefully it was everything it was supposed to be. The bringing it full circle here, Saul mentioned institutional iBuyers. I mentioned iBuyers, you mentioned institution, and we always like to talk about what's happening in government, especially from Saul's camp. And I want to come back to Darren on security as it relates to the government and how they've stepped up and now have gone after some of these ransomware events, and have been actually been able to claw back some of the ransom, as I understand it. So there's some exciting things going there. But Saul, to open it back up on the iBuyer, an iBuyer to me, based on what I've been looking at and reading and the other talking heads out there, is actually the automated buyer, an algorithm going in and buying properties, Zillow going in and buying properties. And this dovetails right to labor shortages in academia and such. If these larger institutions, to your points out, are deploying technology to go and make offers and close, they can do that much faster than I can as a broker, no matter how many tools I have. And that's what's happening. We have some of these larger technologies using iBuyer programs to go in and actually make offers and buy properties, estimate the repairs. I don't think they can calculate the labor shortage, Chris, that you mentioned. But that's what was in the news just today. Wall Street Journal was talking about it. Harvard Business Review actually brought it up. It was just this, all of a sudden everybody was like, wait a minute, what's an iBuyer? And like you saw, I went, iBuyer, I know, I'm a buyer, but no, it's these technologies that are now working in absence of a broker.
Well, so again, it's institutional. I could say an iBuyer is an internet buyer. And in the context of what we all deal today, that's part of the issue with what's ever happening is you've got these immediate buyers. I'll list your house, and if I don't, I'll buy it myself. And as a matter of fact, it's become, for realtors to be able to compete in the business, you almost have to have some immediate buyer program in your pocket, or you can't compete with the other brokers. And so it becomes a point where everybody has to offer this immediate buying. And so there are different ways to fund a program that immediately buys. But so when you say I, or anybody uses the I word, for me, it's not descriptive enough, because it could just mean the immediate buyer. It could mean the internet buyer using tools and technology to, and even in the case you mentioned, there's still human beings involved. This is not just algorithms going out and making offers, but you've got, and you mentioned Zillow, they have a brokerage license, but you've got real estate has been accepted and viewed. And you think about returns that people have gotten over the last few years, they're not much. And if you hold large amounts of money, it actually costs you money to hold it. And so you've got too much money and it doesn't have anywhere to go. And it looks at, and single family homes, single family has actually become an asset class. And so now if you look at the return you've got holding bonds or certain other entities, but if you hold real estate long-term, it makes sense. So I know of major entities, BlackRock being one of them, that go out and buy up homes. Their intention is not to flip them. Their intention is to own them, to manage them. And you could start exchanging. If you had 3 or 4 people that own most of the residential property in the United States, they wouldn't even need to put them on any kind of marketplace. They could trade them amongst themselves because there's so much money in the cost of every single sale. There's all of the cost, and when I say cost, all the people involved and the time involved and the fees involved from the moment somebody decides to list their house for sale, to the closing date, to the funding of the loan, to all the hands that have to touch that loan afterwards, and the servicing and the early payoffs and all that cost. And we hear everybody talking about if we need affordability. And one of the ways to get affordability is to take the costs, and that gets us into the government programs and and what the government's trying to do and the White House memorandums and such. And so when we talk about an iBuyer, to me, it's about organized buying of single family homes. Doesn't matter how it's done, organized buying, maintaining as an asset. And if you can't build replacement, and that's been part of our problem, that for numerous reasons, then you have a shortage, an availability problem, and it drives prices up. And so we look at the who's harmed by that the most. And what I've read is like the first time home buyer, people can't get into the market, they can't afford to get into it. And so the iBuyer is definitely one of the components of this overall paradigm shift that's taking place in the real estate industry.
Yeah, recently I wrote network, not just your network, right? Net worth, not just your network. Network, not just your net worth. Network is your net worth. It used to be in real estate all about the people you know, and that was the flow of information, people to people, person to person, through these networks, these meetings. Now, labor, communities, social tools, the different marketplaces, and my version of the iBuyer, as I understand it to be, the electronic or automated process of buying based on a criteria much faster than you normally would, to your point.
Explain to me how that works. That it has to be a human being. There just can't be a computer that sends out. Somebody's got to answer that. Somebody's got to process that. And so
it evaluates. It's built on the AVM model that Realtor.com,
that's just a piece. That's the AVM. That's the automated valuation model, or in the Realtor case, the Realtor valuation model, the RVM, that goes into calculating what the value that'll give you the loan amount. That's a piece of it. But and you brought up Zillow. So Zillow's got a broker's license. So they say, contact us and we'll make an offer on your property. And people still have to interface with people, right?
Yes.
They just have these great tools that they can utilize that take costs out of the equation.
And they can shorten the time frame to close.
And you know what? That gives people confidence, because now if you shorten that closing process, that typically will increase liquidity. And one of the things that makes real estate a little bit less of a desirable investment for the short term is liquidity aspect. And if you have a ready-made market and things when you can sell quickly, if these entities taking the friction out can take the human hands that have to touch it and bring the cost down, what it really does is it adds to the liquidity, which should add to the desire and the demand, and should all be a good thing. So at least that's where we should be going, towards a good thing. Although, sometimes it's ugly on the way there.
Absolutely. And speaking about liquidity and replacement, that brings us back to labor and construction. As far as home starts and commercial starts, speaking for my market here in Connecticut, land seems to be sitting out there. So I mean, this labor shortage now, what was overpriced lumber and a lack of actual materials, as Chris mentioned, is now labor shortage issues. I'm seeing land sit out there. So spot on, Saul. The first time home buyers are frozen out here in the Northeast. They're not coming into town, which brings us to Becca's question of where are the graduates going? They're going to live with their parents. And then they're probably not going to work in theory. And as Darren's with us, he'll tell you, and they might lose their savings or so forth because they've got an intercepted email that says, your closing docs should send them funds elsewhere. So it's quite a mess. That's my 2 cents on where the new talent is. I think the new talent is not quick to jump into the workforce. I think the labor talent on the construction side is busy in what they're doing or sitting back and waiting for this to flush out. I think there's, for an owner, developer, investor to start a project and then be frozen out for a labor shortage or a material shortage. I mean, the holding costs alone. So that's what I'm seeing, is a lack of new inventory, very similar to a lack of good help being available across industries. Darren, over to you. What recently you shared a document specifically highlighting a few instances now that the government's focused on with realtors again. And that's on the man in the middle on closings. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so there's been a continued uptick in business email compromises, and so this is highlights the importance of continually monitoring your password and your email account and whether they've been compromised. So there is a website, haveibeenpawned.com, which tells you if your email address has been part of any kind of data dump, compromise, network breach. And so, even your iPhone today also will tell you if any of your online accounts, including email accounts, have been compromised. So pay attention to those alerts. It's in the settings under passwords. It will tell you if you've been named in a compromise or your password is frequently used by other people. Because the bad guys, are pretty smart, and they've figured out that if they find people who are involved with, refinancing, paying off a mortgage, they can intercept those emails and change the wiring instructions very easily, set up a domain name, for a fake company and have funds diverted there. It's happening in the commercial real estate business as well, where large transactions are being made and wire instructions are being shared between partner companies involved in a transaction. And so it's very easy to change that document with those wiring instructions and make off with all that money.
My brokerage email gets 3 fake closing requests a day. Here's the closing, here's the loan stuff, da, 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 da. And if I was administering hundreds of deals, very easily something could get misrouted and misrepresented. So being on top of that absolutely is essential. And that's, maybe that's where all the good employment's going, Becca. The new graduates might be shifting, might be getting redirected into this new career path. Saul, do you have anything on the academic side? Where's the youth, the new workforce?
No, I agree with Becca. It doesn't matter where you go and where you look, there's a human shortage, and it's at everything. And it doesn't matter where you go. So, but we have noticed that the car wash,
your car wash is doing better.
It's really doing better, and of course, it's a self-service car wash, so the people aren't coming to work where we are.
I love it. Are you buying any other car washes? There's plenty of land out there.
You know what? All of a sudden, I started getting all these flyers in my email about car. Now, we've owned this car wash since 1979, but I never got a lot of emails about available car. But all of a sudden now, I'm getting flooded with, and no, I'm not going to buy another one, but it's fun to look at them. So I don't mind opening up the email flyers about car washes in Phoenix, Arizona. It's amazing.
Well, and so we've got the human shortage, as so aptly put. And Becca, you're out there creating or drafting these more impressive websites to garner attention and garner the right people in the right way towards an outcome, a purchase, a service, a something. At the same time, Darren's stating, well, wait a minute, people are out there looking to find the right person for the right thing, and there's a lack of people out there. What do you see on the website, on the marketing side? Are people thinking about this yet in the way they design these sites? It goes back to the my building is closed, I'm working from home sign we talked about 3 shows ago. Don't tell people you're not there, because then people might show up to do bad things. Meanwhile, we're putting more and more information online, it seems. We're giving more and more of it away, even on the construction side.
So one of the interesting things that I've noticed actually is some of the old websites are significantly more verbose than a website really needs to be. They're like pages of narrative, page after page after page. And actually the first thing we're doing is like slashing a lot of stuff about what's going on there. But you're right in that you need to be really conscientious of how on website security. So you're making sure word fence is on there. You're making sure that there are different programs. Might be doing XSubmit for anti-spam, like there's and malware protection and things like that. But there are some really cool things that we've been doing lately as far as working with specific website hosting companies that have second lines of defense beyond just the website. So we find that when you're using like managed WordPress through a really wonderful secure host, that they're adding that second line of defense. And that's what you want, is to know that there's not just your, your designer who's making something pretty, but there's like actually a full cadre of professionals and technology professionals behind them too. Also looking out for your best interest, especially as it relates to that web security, because you just get so many entries to every contact form or every newsletter. And we have found that we used to automate a lot of those forms, right? You sign up for the newsletter. Oh, well, we'll just have that go directly to where it needs to go. Nobody ever has to look at it. Well, you want to look at it because you're emailing a bunch of people in Russia who are not interested in the goods and services that you are providing. They actually just don't really have any business looking at what you're doing. And that's not specific to Russia or anything. I'm not trying to be discriminatory by any stretch of the word of things, but it's a reality that there are people who have potentially nefarious reasons to want to get into what's going on with a company or an organization, and keeping on top of all of their emails is a way to start that knowledge base for them. I don't know if that's what you see too, Darren, is that those are some of the ways people infiltrate.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. And, I think that, the whole immigration thing has been an issue as well, because even prior to COVID, it had become more difficult for some, students from other countries to come over here and get visas to study and then to work. And then COVID just really compounded the whole issue. So I don't know if you've been to any kind of areas where people vacation a lot, but there were hotels and restaurants that just couldn't open because they couldn't get people into the country. But on the IT side, 67% of PhDs in this country in science and mathematics are foreign born. 50% of founders of Silicon Valley companies are foreign born. And so, you have that lack of people who've been coming in as well to help alleviate some of these problems. I mean, I have students who are graduating and in IT, and they're just getting 3, 4, 5 job offers, and they will just go with the highest bidder, and it's very difficult. People are calling me up and saying, can you just send me somebody, can you recommend people, and there's not a lot of people out there to recommend.
Not a lot of people to recommend that can move around. Well, back to the labor shortage, it seems, and even the smarter labor shortage. So these are new to the workforce, people that can't travel or won't travel because they can't move. You're saying that it's too restrictive out there as an environment.
Well, things are going to get better, and I think that we're starting to see people traveling a little bit more, but it's I think that ramping up this whole online process and being able to cater to students who can't leave their country and are in a different time zone. A lot of universities weren't ready for what happened with the pandemic, and putting everybody online and being able to design their courses that would be appealing to students who couldn't leave their country. But it's I think it will become easier and better over time, but for now it's still I'm asking my students if they need a job offer, if they already have worked something out themselves in IT, I could say.
Well, speaking of this shortage of labor, travel restrictions, and so forth, here we are on Zoom, two continents, I believe, or at least across this country in a bunch of different ways. What thoughts does the group have, Saul, Chris, and Becca, for remote work? What do you see on your sides of the fence as a go forward? Data aside, network aside, it's nice to get together with people, but in actuality, especially with Darren's group, your new IT people can work mostly remote, minus the physical hookups and disconnects. But Saul, you're on the ground on the data side with a bunch of different groups and in California, I might add. What's your thoughts on this going back to work, or the new work, remote work? Speaking about networks, net worth, and so forth.
are learning how to use interfaces in different ways.
So they're all going to the metaverse?
Yeah, so as we sit here, we can utilize this platform in a way that maybe a group of second graders couldn't utilize this platform, right? And so different groups of people are trying to achieve different things. We're forced into utilizing something that they would have gotten to anyway, but it just got accelerated by COVID. So different uses, different groups of people using it, ties into working at home, new attitudes. And so to me, it's like we've had this amazing thing that's happened in the world, and it created new behaviors because people had to create new behaviors to get around this problem. And so now we've got all these different new behaviors that we've all created. I mean, I haven't driven, and there's lots of things that I used to do a lot more frequently. And I'm actually feeling in some cases that it's okay. You know, it's okay if I don't fly all over the country to do things. You know, this is just right, just like this. And I can get the same effect. So people are learning how to use it. They were forced into it. So the event forced a change in behaviors. And then the real question is, which of those changes will become habits? And when people talk about some new normal, it's some combination of utilization of whatever we had before this thing happened and whatever we had after this, as we start whatever after this means. And so that's kind of, in my mind, that's where we're moving. We've been forced into trying different things. And some people are going to, it's long tail. It's not everybody's going to find everything works the same. We're going to find different things that we might not have gone into, at least as soon as we did. So I'm encouraged by certain uses that I see of Zoom and these other types of conferences. And sometimes I'm discouraged when I see them because I know so much slacking can go on and so much non-attention can go. You know, we designed the ePro course, the technology certification course for the National Association of Realtors in 2001. In 2001, we created this online course. And so we had this huge question, me and John Riley and Mike Barnett, is how do you keep the student engaged when they're reading text? And how do you know? And then certain states would say, well, they got to check in and put a password in and the changes. And so we were just learning how to engage. And I think as more people learn how to use these tools to engage, that the communication will get better and they'll find substitutes for other things they're doing. So we're in this we're always, but this transition continues with this big interrupter that got popped in. It seems like 2 years worth of it. And it's changed us. And then the question is how much of those habit changes then become permanent.
Right.
To Saul's point, a lot of it I've noticed on, it's that idea of being kind of comfortable and being uncomfortable. And I noticed that a lot of this stuff dealing with Zoom, we were all trying to kind of figure it out. And what I've noticed on a lot of the business development stuff and a lot of the meetings that I've had and a lot of the stuff that's been going on lately is it's kind of this idea of a lot of I was completely uncomfortable, much like everybody else, as this thing kind of kicked off. And like, all right, now we have to figure out Zoom. Now we have to learn this new habit, which has become a habit and all that sort of stuff. But as things kind of move forward, there's a lot of kind of fluff that ends up being cut out through Zoom because it's like, and I think it's a little bit in the back of people's minds where, I'm not so comfortable. You're not so comfortable. But we're comfortable with one another. Let's get through what we need to get through and kind of conduct business and make things happen. And, it's kind of that, we use that new normal, which is really, it's been interesting to see all of it kind of transform. Obviously on the construction side, the building side of things and the being on site, it's tough. But the technology in other ways has made it possible for people to still be engaged with what's going on. I'm seeing a lot more of the virtual tours and things of that nature becoming kind of the new normal. I came from the education field and I went on to check out some of the old schools that I used to work with for a client of mine to see if they can utilize that for the labor shortage, try to find a few students that were going to be graduating soon. And it was amazing. A couple of them had the counters on their virtual tours. And it was amazing to see how many people are going through and clicking and clicking and clicking, going through the actual, virtual tours. And I reached out to the career services department, and in speaking to them, they said, "Oh yeah, we have tons of kids coming in now, at a point where they're not even visiting the schools anymore. And it's not a travel thing where they're going overseas. We're talking more a state or two over, where they're taking the virtual tours, they're learning what they need to learn. They understand that they're going to be doing a lot of this stuff virtually, and they're choosing their school and moving into the their collegiate careers that way. It's interesting.
Home.
It's interesting.
Staying at home, basically.
From home, with the idea of, hey, if this opens up and I want to move out to the school, I'm happy with everything I saw. I'm happy with everything that, but again, if they were sophomores or juniors and the parents are comfortable and everyone seems comfortable being uncomfortable, kind of, they feel comfortable enough to say, you know what, when everything clears up, whether that be my sophomore year, my junior year, the end of my freshman year, I'm comfortable enough to, pack my stuff and move into this place, because if they're a sophomore, they developed, but they started virtually in college, they've developed relationships just like this. That's it. They haven't, it's interesting. It's interesting. Maybe they toured once before everything kicked off.
You can make an argument that maybe the labor shortage, at least from the new graduates, is that they don't know how to be in a workplace. So
if not now,
they've been doing Zoom.
Yeah.
I mean, they were social freshmen, sophomores, but then they graduated at home. They've never actually been in an office. And this Wall Street Journal actually did a little piece on this recently. Many of these people coming into the office for the first time, and although in New York, 37% of offices aren't bringing back their workforce, at least not a hard commitment to bring them back yet. Some of these new people won't know how to sit in a meeting, what the proper protocol is. They might learn on LinkedIn or wherever, but there's a whole new dynamic of people that are out there, remote people, and I think it's going to stay that way. From what I'm seeing, and if they can't build the buildings, then they have no choice. So that's far not, let alone the infrastructure.
These retirements are up as well. I mean, it's the right time to retire for a lot of people. They looking at their retirement portfolio. The stock market is at all-time highs, and so it's very easy for a lot of people to say, I'm going to retire right now, and so that's also put pressure on the finding people to work. And as well as that, we have half the companies who are saying you can work from home right now, and others who are saying we need you back. And there's a lot of movement between companies now. I mean, I saw one Silicon Valley company that was offering $50 a day or something for employees who would come back into the office. So they're trying to create some kind of incentive for employees to come back.
Seems like a lot of pulling and dragging in every direction, and shortage, to Saul's point, to Chris' point, Becca, to your point, shortages in every aspect. Where did all the people go? Where did all the materials go? How did we get here? We went to zero when COVID really hit. Things ran out. Scarcity was not only a thing, it was on everyone's mind in 100 different ways. And now we have an opportunity to plan better, to choose to get organized, but it seems like we're still missing a lot of gaps. And so maybe the government's addressing this better than I'm articulating it, but what are you seeing NAR doing? What's going on a broader scheme?
Well, with NAR, NAR is right now,
NAR,
probably the biggest thing that people could know about NAR is the Realtors Relief Fund.
Okay.
And so this is occupying a lot of people's minds, right? All the catastrophes across the country right now and all the problems. And so NAR is putting a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on the Realtors Relief Fund, which was initiated after 9/11 and has done a lot of good over the years. So that's the one piece that I would say about NAR. And now here, the other piece, and we know this, is, NAR's resources are limited. People often forget that. It only has as much money as, a certain amount of money. And then for its political aspects, it only has a certain amount of money. So it has to do everything it can within the amount of money that it gets. And it does a pretty good job, but actually it does a great job. But what I see happening now, we've talked about this before, is that the Department of Justice, the Federal Trade Commission, probably the IRS, and the full force of the administrative branch, the executive branch of government, administrative law, coming in to do what it's wanted to do for the last 40 years, and that's change the structure of the way things work in the real estate industry. And there's a whole history, and we don't go over the history and the documentation, but then on July 8th, NAR, the Department of Justice backed out of conversation with NAR on July 9th, and we get this memo. So from the White House is about what they're going to do with regard to antitrust. So I think along with the technology industry, because they're a target as well, but they have a lot more money than NAR. I think NAR is going to be distracted, and it's going things that we take for granted that NAR has to fight to keep for us in the real estate industry. We're going to see some of those things go by the wayside because they're not going to have the resources to fight off all of the dragons that are now going to be in the next year or two are going to be attacking it.
So
that doesn't mean nothing's going to get done. That just means NAR in certain instances is going to be limited as to what it can do.
that's fair. And when we talk about some of the things going away, one of the biggest issues that I think touches one, if not all of us in our day-to-day business, is the 1031 exchange, how that applies, how our clients are taking advantage or not taking advantage. Darren, this applies to you in the sense of money getting stolen, but for the rest of us, for those who don't know, the 1031 exchange is a way to defer taxes as you transact by reinvesting till death, depending on how good your accountant is, how well you execute for certain tax brackets. And like kind exchanges and securities and up from there, right? It seems to go back and forth, and I'm not going to talk politics on it, and I hope we won't go that way here. But what other dragons do you think are coming out of NAR's multi-focus at this point, having to bifurcate their focus?
So 1031 definitely is a target because it's
yes.
Now, and I would bet that NAR's the legislative advocates and the volunteers that participate as directors and on those committees and forums are going to do everything they can to protect 1031, the ability to grow your estate with pre-tax dollars. And that's just provided you play by the rules, you're able to roll money from one property to another. It affects the basis of the property, but if you wait until you die, you get an elevated basis. And so it's a great model for people to follow to acquire generational wealth, right? Just a tremendous tool, but people don't understand it. And people who use it don't understand it often. And so the things that are easiest to take away are the things that people aren't familiar with. And so I see that's something that's worth defending, and it's going to need to be defended. So as a specific you bring up, there's a specific where NAR can help, the real estate world. Now, at the same time, there's people that don't believe that's a good thing. People who believe that you shouldn't be allowed to roll that wealth from one generation to another by first having the advantage of a 1031 exchange and then getting elevated basis at death. And so while it's a slam dunk, makes sense to us, it doesn't make sense to everybody. So you're going to have a lot of, and you know what, all of this environment and the ability for us to do this and other people to do this and communicate just going to make this a much fuller argument. And hopefully we'll have some legislative advocacy on behalf of 1031, but I actually see private property rights in general being decreasing. I see a national change in land use policy. I see the funding and the policy philosophy there to change land use in this country. And I already see the beginnings of that. It's already taking place. And we talked about walkability and higher densities, and those things are going to take place. And some people think it's great, and some people don't think it's great. And some people think that's infringing upon my private property rights to deny me the right to use this property the way I want it. And some people say it's better for society if we use that property that way. I'm just get all of these things going on right now. And NAR is being sued by the Department of Justice. And we got right. So people are distracted, and that's when things slip through.
Absolutely.
Very astute, Saul. I just want to add that what my daughter thinks we should be doing with our property, as in our very small backyard, is building a Waffle House. So she thinks that is the appropriate use for every piece of our backyard property, and has written a letter to the directors of real estate there to reinforce that notion that that is the right land use for our neighborhood.
Highest and best use.
Absolutely the highest and best use. And then you just got to build it. Well, get it approved first. The Waffle House. I think that's fantastic. The technology, the legislative changes coming, not coming, a lot of things happening there. Different policies getting put into place amongst so much tragedy and other things going on in the world. And then this construction shortage and what that really means for labor. To me, and I stumble on the labor part. I understand the academic part, but there's, to my knowledge, there's a lot of new labor. There should be a lot of labor showing up. We've got 25 other states no longer giving extra money for the unemployment programs, right? And that being said, most of the clients I talk to, owners, business owners, they have trouble finding smart labor. And that, to Becca's point, I don't understand. New labor or experienced labor. Seems like there's just a vacuum of people, to the group's point. And Darren, what I mean, you work with PACE. What are the students saying? You mentioned that your students are out there looking and you're happy to find them places, but some of your colleagues, how far and wide, what's your thoughts on this, on the labor force?
Yeah, it's, well, it is, I think that there's just been also a need for more IT resources as well, because, you know, with the pandemic, we've actually, you know, needed more people to develop apps or that kind of thing associated with the pandemic, or businesses have extended the use of their apps for people to upload, you know, their vaccination cards or PCR tests or that kind of thing. And so, you know, there's just a much bigger demand. I think that the biggest problem continues to be with government and attracting a skilled labor force in IT with, you know, a salary that doesn't seem, you know, on par with private sector, unfortunately. You know, I think there's tremendous benefits to going and working with government, you know, pension benefits, and students don't see that far ahead, but you know, there is that that problem, I think, mainly on the side of government. And critical infrastructure is a big problem, and protecting, you know, our utilities, energy companies. We saw that with Coastal Pipeline and the ransomware attack. We know that there's tremendous problems with our critical infrastructure, but finding positions for those people is very difficult. You know, interestingly, one of the things that I'd seen on LinkedIn is that there was an unfilled cybersecurity position, high-ranking position at Coastal Pipeline that was unfilled before that attack happened. So we're seeing like these critical positions that are unfilled at many of these big companies. It's not just that energy company, it's many energy companies and many critical infrastructure companies.
Well, so the labor shortage isn't just for construction. That's what I'm hearing. It's across all
No.
places except Saul's Car Wash, which is, you know, full is self-service. Self-service.
Point out, but haven't you gone to the grocery store and they only have one aisle lit up? And it's not because they're trying to save money, it's because they only got one person that came to work that day. But all the people standing in line, they're saying, well, they should hire more people. They should, right? But no, they're not around.
Today I would agree with that statement. So, you know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I refused to use those automated checkouts because I thought it took jobs. Thought they were that, you know, that was the natural order. And then now they have a machine that calls out a spill. It follows me around the store when I'm spilling things, you know, replacing the maintenance guy. So, but today I think you're right. I think there's just not enough labor, smart labor, good labor, hardworking labor available across all spaces. Darren, to your point. That being said, what can we do to fix that from a marketing standpoint? How can we get our message out there, our needs out there in a better way as we come up to the 10 minutes to the top of the hour here?
I love that you asked that, because one of the things we've been doing is helping some of our clients rewrite how they're positioning their company and reevaluate some of those factors that may be intrinsically beneficial to their workforce. So for instance, like one of the big things that I hope attracts people to Carlson Integrated is that we're really flexible and that we are like a warm, loving culture, because I think culture matters so much more right now. And it's really hard to create and really hard to sustain in these remote workforces. And so trumping on the fact that you've got a great culture matters. Also matters how you're investing in your company. I do see that some of the bigger brokerages in Chicago, for instance, have done a little bit of, I don't want to be offensive at all. So, but they may have eradicated some of the resources they used to provide their brokers. Like they may have used to have administrative staff. They may have used to have a marketing team. And now brokers are expected to self-serve all of their marketing, self-serve all of their administrative needs. And so if another firm is able to say, oh, and we use marketing, or like we use Carlson Integrated and they help us and they do all of our social media for us and they talk about all of our properties for us, it's more compelling to them and they're starting to use that in their messaging for attracting new hires. And I think that you'll see more and more of companies trying to get out of their own way of process to be able to amplify a message that they're actually good places. They may not have made it to Crane's top 100 places to work because they may be under the radar, but they're still good people and a good place to be. They may have to fix some things to become a good place to be, but they got it. They can at least amplify the message if they are actually a good place to be.
So the perks and culture, which sounds like being at home. Why do I want to be at home, and how do I get you to go to work? So that's good, and that's fantastic.
Well, also flexibility, Andreas, because I will tell you,
Between the two,
there's not a lot of places that have jobs that are 100% remote right now. So there's a bit of a disconnect between employers and employees who are job hunting, because I have a friend who was looking for a pretty significant SharePoint administrator role. It's a very, very large role, a big organization. She clicked first on all of these roles and she's like, oh, there's so many jobs out there. Then she hit 100% remote. That list went like that. So that disconnect shows up really thoroughly. But the good news for employers who don't want to be 100% remote is that neither do most employers. A lot of employers don't want to be 100% remote.
well, and we don't have well, to my knowledge, we don't have robots yet that can build buildings with an engineer sitting remote 100%. Saul, am I right there? You don't. You haven't
No,
heard
I
anything.
I've been listening to some podcasts and reading some stuff about changing all of labor, moving into capital through the use of technology, and then the issue is who gets to set the policy and what do we do with people's spare time. So completely the opposite.
We all retire.
Well, that's basically what this is. And then the question is, who sets the policy? Who controls all these people that don't have to do anything because the automation? It's Ezra Klein. It was a blog I listened to just the other day. It was pretty interesting. It was practical AI. That's what the theme was. Practical AI and the integration of practical AI. So I think we're going to have to deal with fewer and fewer needs for human. This is really the secret to people that want to kind of stay in business doing the things they do. It's to continue to look at what types of skills can't be duplicated by a computer. What are the skills that are just can't, like being a waitress, can't do it remotely, right? So there are some things that you just, and that's what people have to start thinking about. Of the job that I have now, of the things that I do now, which things can they just can't do without me? Now, famous last words, right? They'll never be able to replace me. But that's the attitude people kind of have to take if they have to find and carve out their spot in this changing world, because it's changing and it's changing exponentially. And I've been sitting on top of this change thing in technology in the real estate industry since 1993. And it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot. People don't see it because it's out of their context. It's changed a lot. And that change is going to accelerate. And it's going to catch a lot of people with their pants down.
And it has accelerated to, I mean, the one of my favorite moments recently was the Back to the Future movie coming, the year and time, Back to the Future happening in real life. The only thing was missing was flying cars, a time machine. Everything else was there. So the stuff we dreamed about and talked about, even you and I years ago, it's all there today. Assets are being traded on apps, real estate. You're buying fractional interests in real estate and becoming part of these institutional offerings when before you couldn't even see them, let alone buy a portion of them or the portfolios behind them, all of which has to be built somehow, not by robots. So it seems like you have a big labor force headed your way, Chris, because anyone who's going to be displaced by automation, as far as I know, you cannot remote work the development side, the building side, the site work of it.
It's true. It's true. They have to want to do it. That's the only
I would love
problem.
to drive a backhoe or swing one of those giant balls into a building. I mean, I want to push the button. I want to see the building implode.
I often think about when I was younger, different direction that I might want to go. And I actually had a company. There is this kind of new phenomenon going on. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the country, but I know in Connecticut, they started a couple of these smash rooms where they have bottles or they have fax machines or they have donated stuff and people literally pay to go demolish it. Like they get them, safely demolish this stuff for a half hour. It's supposed to be like a stress reliever, this, that, and the other thing. We actually had a company that I knew of, a construction company known for their demo projects. They actually start doing some advertising and some promo. Like they were there. They like actually set up a table, and with the thinking outside the box, I don't think it worked. I have no idea. But the idea of, hey, if you like this, guess what? This is what we do for a living. Before these things get built, we have to knock them down. The marketing was really cool behind it. I thought it was kind of neat. But I think it was a real stretch. But they also got to brand their name a little bit with sponsoring a night, and I think they had people coming in, invited guests to come in and stuff like that. But interesting stuff going on out there. Everyone's trying to think outside the box.
Well, talking about thinking outside the box, I know Professor Hayes has to go teach a bunch of students how to break the box or save the box, being in IT security. So with 2 minutes to the hour, let's go around. What's the one thing that from each sector that you should do in the next 30 days to be the most valuable human element within your business to your clients, to your customers, to help you succeed? Darren, why don't you start off? I know you have to go, the wrangle teenagers or young adults.
I was just going to say that, I've been teaching online for, well over a decade, nearly 2 decades. And there is something lost by not being, in person. A lot of the jobs that I've gotten for my students, it's through a personal introduction to a friend, and they've talked, and there is that small talk, and that small talk is important with building up a rapport, building up some trust. And so I think there's something lost with that. We have a lot of students who are entrepreneurs building their own businesses, and kind of that small talk doesn't happen in a Zoom call with a group of people, and people don't feel as comfortable with talking about, personal things or brainstorming. So hopefully, I think we can get back in person and we can, continue our discussions and create more opportunities, because I think that just remaining online, and if businesses don't bring back people, then something is lost. That's my parting thoughts, and thank you, Andreas, and great to see everybody.
Thank you, Darren. And I've recently learned that the order in which your heads appear on my screen is different for each of us. So, Becca, would you go next instead of saying go clockwise?
So that was a really good question, Andreas. So how can you be the best human element
to your business?
To your business,
to your clients. Yeah.
So because we've talked so much about jobs and so much about kind of the challenges that are within that market right now, I actually think what my recommendation would be for all of us is to explore how we can create culture as individuals. because culture doesn't only come from top down, and it certainly doesn't only come from bottom up. We all are able to create culture around us and create relationships. And that ticks in Chris's conversation about these new normals and being comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what developing culture really is. It's making sure that even though it is a Zoom meeting, a professional meeting, that you are asking how the other person's doing and caring how they respond. So it's trying to build water cooler conversations into your regular meetings and your day to day. So it can be done. It's not easy, but we all can build culture around us. So just that encouragement is what I would.
Keeping the human element in the meeting.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Well,
How can you best be the human element of your
well,
business?
it's
Like,
easy
be
to
human.
start. It's very easy to start. I've recently noticed that a lot of my emails started to be very directive. You know, when I went back and read them, I went, okay, maybe I need to soften that up, because it was just the medium of communication, because I'm just not interacting with people as often as I used to. So I think that's a spot on point. So absolutely. Sal, what's the one thing, and I'm going to speak to resilience because of what you brought up, Becca, and then jump over to Chris. But Sal, what's the one thing from your side of the fence besides supporting NAR to help support us as a human?
Yeah, so the culture thing is important. There are many different ways to create culture, and particularly now people want to be able to do that. I think that we have to accept the fact that there's this massive change taking place. It's going to have sociological change as well as physical change, and be more receptive to that and look for the opportunity and avoid the dissent. Look for the opportunity, avoid the dissent, and look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, and figure out how you can take the assets you now have and utilize those assets in a way that benefits you and the people around you in the future. So use the strengths you have today to carve out that place that you're going to be in, where you're going to locate your vision, whatever that might be, in the future. You got the capabilities already there to project yourself out there. And there's a lot of change in the meantime, but you have to go back, reassess those strengths, and then use them specifically to project and to drive you to where you want to hit.
Absolutely. So for looking towards the future and staying human is the human element that I'm hearing. And Chris, over to you. What's the one thing we could be doing from your side of the fence?
From the business owner side of things, this is something that I've taken notice and really kind of enjoyed. You know, a lot of the hiring process in, you know, you see and I'm sure Becca sees a lot of this, and she touched on this a little bit as far as the way people are writing their ads and kind of, you know, taking that marketing approach to getting the people that they want. A lot of times they're coming from other companies, but once some of these business owners are finding some good people to be involved in what's going on, is just taking that extra step to make them, especially if they're coming back into an office setting, or if they're remote, when they are making the hires and they're finding better people and they're doing better things, starting off right off the bat with making some of these hires welcome in the office. I've seen things, you know, I've seen pictures recently of someone say, oh, I just got a new job and this is where I am. And, you know, the cubicle is filled with, you know, some sort of basket that has been custom made to some of the things that they've learned through the interview process, along with some of the stuff that may make them feel a little bit safer, because not everyone feels necessarily comfortable. And quite frankly, people are just kind of making that return back to the workplace. And if you've been out of the office for a couple of years and all of a sudden you're going from the comfort of your own home back into a strange office, strange building, or a cubicle for that matter, where you're expected to produce, if an owner is taking the time to really let it know, like, we appreciate you from day one. We're appreciative that you're coming along. We assume you probably had other opportunities out there because we know how hard it is to hire people. Not by just saying that, but actually showing it and getting someone to say, you know what, this might be a place where I could stick around for a while, because the other part of it that we could touch on another time is I'm seeing a lot of people bouncing into places and bouncing out of places after a month, 2 months, 3 months, and it's for different reasons. A lot of people are going to that entrepreneurial side also. They're saying, you know what? I felt a certain independence when I was working from home. This isn't, I got to try something new. So it's really that human element of making someone feel, welcome from day one. This is something that, we want you here and we want you working for us. And, it's just that little extra step that I think we've all kind of had a little bit of a stutter step given to us the past year and a half, where we may not say thank you, or we may not show that all the time. And when you do it at a key time, when someone's not expecting it, it may be the difference between someone sticking with you for 2 to 3 years rather than 2 to 3 months.
Sure. The making people feel at home at work and making them feel like they're a part of something in a time when coming out of feeling isolated is a big one. My point was going to be resilience. Not everybody, although you have a certain level of resilience to what's happening around you, work, coming into work. I remember the first time I went to meet someone new, and I went to shake their hand, and it was just this huge uncomfortable moment. And although I was kind of fine, I would have shook hands with the person. The other person wasn't. And other people still have masks on, and other people on technology want to see it, don't want to see it. You have to be consciously aware of how your movements and actions are affecting the other person, because now more than ever, they're not used to those movements, just like technology. I used to walk into the room with the iPad going on in my arm, and certain people would immediately go away because they didn't want the technology conversation. Now everybody wants the technology conversation. So, but they don't want to shake hands, or they don't want to talk about certain aspects. So for me, it's raising your situational awareness of the room you're in, and understanding what's happening from their point of view, not from yours. Because the worst thing you can do is think you know what someone's trying to do based on your own lens, which even in coding, there's always a bias. So be aware of your own biases and develop resilience. With that, this was quite a leap from our traditional conversations, but all in all, a great conversation. Mr. Mendoza, will you roll us out, please? He's sleeping at the switch, working from home.